Hi, Colin. I'm Luca, the co-founder and owner of the Living Care Company. It's great to have you on our podcast today. Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, Luca.
Can you tell me what your job is and what it involves, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Director of Communications at Headway, the Brain Injury Association. So my role is fairly wide ranging, really. It covers the digital communications we do, so website, social media, also any media work that we have. So interactions with journalists and broadcast media, policy and public affairs activities is quite a big element of my role, as is raising awareness of brain injury and making sure that the general public have heard of brain injury and truly understand the condition as best they can.
Understood. And in a nutshell, Headway, you mentioned it briefly, but what's the main thrust of what Headway does?
Sure. So in essence, we improve life after brain injury for survivors of brain injury, carers, family members. It starts in the immediate aftermath of brain injury. So for example, we have an emergency fund that will help people cope with the financial implications of brain injury. So that might allow somebody to be at the bedside of somebody that's experienced a brain injury with those travel and hotel costs and so on. We've also got a nurse-led helpline that's a free phone number. So we offer compassionate support as well as practical advice on brain injury. And we've also got a range of award-winning publications on symptoms of brain injury and effects of brain injury, obviously a comprehensive website. Um, and the brain injury identity card as well, which brain injury survivors can carry, and it describes their brain injury, the effect on them. And that can really help in a number of social situations, as well as with the criminal justice system, if they're having interactions with police and so on. But also we offer support for an incredible network of groups and branches across the UK. Headway branches are led by volunteers, and Headway groups are led independent charities in their own right. So we've got around 120 groups and branches around the country, and they really, I suppose the one word that sums up what they do is reablement. They help brain injury survivors to recover lost functions and maximize their levels of independence.
Extremely worthy charity, actually. We've got ABI week, Acquired Brain Injury Week, coming up pretty soon. What
Yes.
week is that in May? Remind me.
It starts on the 20th of May and runs to the 26th. So 7 days.
And obviously, that's a time in which Headway will be doing extra work on most probably raising awareness and whatnot. But tell me what you've got
Yeah,
planned for that
e-
week
ex-
and in the run up to it.
exactly. Yeah, sure. So the theme for ABI week this year, it's called A Life Rewritten. And it's really charting how brain injury can affect anyone at any time and can really throw our life plans into disarray. I think most of us have got a rough idea of how we expect our life to pan out in certain goals and expectations. But the fact is that brain injury can strike anyone at any time through a range of effects, whether it's due to illness or accident. And really what we're looking to do is talk to brain injury survivors about what they thought their life was going to be before brain injury, what happened to them in that moment when brain injury struck, and really how they've come to terms and how they've maybe reinvented their life post brain injury. I think for me, the campaign was actually inspired by somebody I worked with on raising awareness of cycle helmet safety. So a guy called David Baker was a detective with Scotland Yard and Dorset Police. And he was cycling home from work one day when a van pulled in front of him and he hit the side of the van. His cycle helmet, I think it's fair to say, saved his life, given that it was pretty much split in half. And you'd think that could have been David's head if he wasn't wearing that cycle helmet. But really what was interesting for me was talking to him about immediately after his accident. He was in a coma. He had many effects. His eyesight was badly affected and he wasn't able to rejoin the police force after that. And he was in doldrums and not knowing what to do with his life. A couple of things changed, actually. One, he got a puppy, and that sort of gave him a sense of purpose and more purpose in life and got him out of bed and walking in wildlife. But also a friend lent him a camera, and he started to take the camera with him on walks with Rafa, his dog, and take photographs of Rafa. And actually that love of photography turned into his career. So he went back and studied commercial photography at Bournemouth Arts University, graduated with a first-class degree, and now this is his career. He's a commercial photographer. So he's gone from a detective in the police force to now being a commercial photographer. And David's actually the photographer for this campaign. So when you do see
amazing.
a Life Rewritten campaign, all of those photographs have been taken by David. And yeah, his story, it's fair to say, inspired me to think about this campaign and how he's rewritten his life and indeed his sense of identity. He thought of himself, he was in the police, he was a cyclist. That was how he identified. And now he's a commercial photographer, and that's him forging a new life for himself in a very different direction as a result of brain injury.
It's an amazing story. So following on from David's story, Colin, can you give me any other examples of the subjects of ABI Week?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, like I say, David's story is really interesting, and that tells about how he's reforged or forged a new career for himself. We interviewed a lady called Alison as well, and similarly, she has changed her career, or rather, she's reprioritized her time. So she was an academic before her brain injury. She was actually doing really well, a high-flying academic to do with the history of fashion. That was her specialist topic. She actually suffered from a number of neurological issues over many years before being diagnosed with an acoustic neuroma, which is a type of tumor that she needed to have operated on. And she actually had a very successful operation, as these things go, without too many after effects or without some of the normal after effects, which she counts herself to be very lucky. But what it really made her do was take a step back from her academic career. And she does still teach at a university, but she's prioritized her hobby in a much bigger way in her life. So she was always into millinery or hat making. And now she's formed her own company, and hobby has become a much bigger part of her life. So she's really reprioritized, had to think to herself, what do I enjoy doing? How do I want to spend my time and the rest of my life? And has really taken a step back from that career and built up her hobby into a bigger part of her life.
Lesson for us almost, probably, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
full time doing what you enjoy.
Exactly. That's Alison's story, and it's a really interesting interview that she has with Andrew. Also, we interviewed Justina and Liz. Liz experienced a stroke at the age of 37, and Justina has her daughter. She was 17 at the time, and we spoke to Justina and Liz and about the impact of the stroke on both of their lives. You can imagine the mother-daughter relationship that did exist between the two. And the interaction between Justina and Liz is an absolute joy, the relationship and the strength of the relationship that they have. And it really charts the overnight change where the mother-daughter relationship changes quite dramatically, where Justina, the daughter, takes on more of a caring role for her mom, Liz. And it's even more impactful when you think about their ages, because Liz was relatively young when she had her stroke at the age of 37. And she was super fit as well. Miss Energy, I think her name was. And she'd think nothing of running a marathon one day and doing all these exercise classes. She was a personal trainer at the time of having her stroke. And it really came as a huge shock to her family when she had a very severe stroke and was left with a number of effects on her physical health. And so she absolutely lost a huge amount of independence and relied on her family in a much bigger way. And now, Justina, as well as a full-time carer, looks after her mum.
So interesting.
One of the key things for this year's campaign, we're really privileged to have somebody working with us who's been in the public eye lately, a brain injury survivor who was on national television for a lot earlier this year, a chap called Andrew Jenkins. So he was on a TV show called The Traitors, which I think is one of, if not the most popular TV shows in recent history, certainly. And he reached the final stages of that show. And before they reached the crescendo of the series, each finalist told a little bit about their background, their story. And it was one of those pin drop moments, really, when Andrew was talking to his fellow contestants about his brain injury that he experienced 23 years ago. He was in something of a catastrophic car crash, sustained an incredibly serious brain injury. And he did, as part of the campaign, Andrew describes what happened back then. But fair to say, it's one of the most horrendous experiences that I've heard. And he was actually pronounced dead at the scene of that car crash. Obviously, it turned out that wasn't the case, thankfully. And he's made something of a remarkable recovery in the 23 years since. So we're really privileged to have him as part of the campaign. And really, that's given us a different angle this year, a different dynamic as part of the campaign. We've arranged for Andrew to discuss or talk to other brain injury survivors. There's a series of films on YouTube, actor-on-actor conversations, where they talk about a theme to do with acting, and it's very much peer-to-peer. And we've gone for a similar concept with this year's campaign. So Andrew is a brain injury survivor talking to other survivors about their respective stories and how they've rewritten their lives, if you like, and come to terms with things.
Amazing. And how are you planning to spread the word on the stories of the brain injury survivors that's going to be part of this year's campaign?
So we've got videos. We've got a video of Andrew talking to camera about his own experience. And then we've got Andrew talking to the other case studies involved and discussing their respective experiences and what they've been through. So those videos will be key. We've got one central video for the campaign, and we've got longer form stories, if you like, for each brain injury survivor who's telling their story, each around about 9 or 10 minutes. So we'll be sharing those videos. We've also got lots of social media assets and posters as well. So we're lucky to have that network of groups and branches around the country, as well as our retail shops, the Headway charity shops. And so we'll be using the posters in those outlets too. But one of the main ways of doing it is through national media exposure. So we're looking to get newspaper coverage and ideally TV coverage of the campaign as well. And one of the cornerstones for that will be a survey that we launched. So we know that people talking about themselves and their experiences, it makes great news stories that will hopefully get coverage. But if we can back that up with data as well and some research, we know that newspapers are more likely to pick it up. So we launched a survey in relation to the campaign, and it was our most popular survey that we've ever had. So that goes to show that the theme really resonated with people and has really engaged our audience. So over 3,500 people have completed our survey. And so we've got a number of
sort of topics
results.
did the survey touch on, and what were the sort of findings and takeaways?
Yeah, sure. So one of the main things we wanted to know is how people's lives have changed as a result of their brain injury. And not just for brain injury survivors, but we wanted to track the ripple effect on family members as well, and friends and carers. So with the survey for brain injury survivors, it's probably no surprise that a huge proportion, 96%, felt like that their brain injury changed their life. Only 54%, I say only, that's quite a significant drop, thought that their injury had changed their life for the worse. And I think that really reflects the severity of the brain injury that the person's had, and indeed their ability to rewrite their narrative and to really zero in on what's important to them. A number of people have said, actually, my brain injury made me reassess who I am and what's important to me, and have reprioritized things as a result of my brain injury. And I think that's a really important theme to come out of the campaign. Other themes that came out will be to do with life goals and changing those priorities and expectations. There's also, we charted a more heavy reliance on others. So 71% of survivors are less independent and now rely more on others. And there's an important statistic coming out about mental health as well, with around 70% brain injury survivors charting a decreased deterioration in their mental health, with anxiety and depression being highly reported as well. So that was brain injury survivors. We've had similar...
I was going to say, typically changes, obviously every person is an individual, and the impact of brain injury and the severity of that brain injury will also have an effect. But typically, what are the sorts of changes that people experience in their lives from brain injury?
So it can start with a number of practical things, and probably ones that you might be able to predict. For example, somebody might lose their job because they're no longer able to do what they once did, whether it's because of physical disability or problems with cognition and so on. Some people will lose the ability to drive and will lose their driving license. So that can obviously have a huge knock-on effect on their levels of independence. And also, one of the main things I think has come out of the survey and the campaign is people's hobbies and interests. And the knock-on effect for that is who's the tribe that we belong to? Who are the groups and the people that we interact with? Maybe somebody used to, I don't know, play a particular sport, for example, football or rugby. And that was how they identified. Obviously, there's us as professionals in our jobs. And then there's us as clubs and the community groups that we belong to. And I think once we lose those things, that's our identity, if you like, that almost the essence of who we are and how we think of ourselves. I'm Colin. I've got this kind of role. I work in communications and marketing, and I enjoy this kind of thing, squash, golf, cricket, whatever. You consider yourself to be this sports person, but in the aftermath of brain injury, it's that recalibration and that feeling of losing yourself that is at the heart of this campaign, really. And people have to go through process to rediscover who they are. In the conversations and the interviews that Andrew undertook, one of the things that kept coming out was grief. And it's almost a grief for who I once was pre-brain injury. That was one of the recurring themes, and people really struggling with those stages of grief, anger and denial and so on, before you get to that acceptance stage. And I think it's only when you get to the acceptance stage that you can really rechart who you are and reassess your life and your life goals.
Fascinating. Really fascinating. Colin. What did you learn about the impact of brain injury on family members, carers of those who experienced ABI?
It's a good question. And that's something that we really wanted to bring out in the campaign, is not just the story of brain injury survivors, but the people that are close to them, the family members, the people that become carers. And often they also need to rewrite their lives and their expectations for their life. Again, many survivors have to give up their jobs, but so too do their carers. And the carers have to give up their jobs, their hobbies, and their interests in order to care for somebody full time, often. And they also lose something of their identity. We've talked about how we perceive ourselves through our interests and our jobs and so on. And exactly the same kind of thing happens to carers. And I mentioned the word grief earlier on. And a survivor might grieve for the person they were pre-brain injury. Carers also go through this grief process, for their life has been changed, and maybe the career that they once had or the interests they once had, but they can also be grieving because the relationship has changed and the person they once knew has changed as a result of brain injury. So I think the survey results really bring that out as well, that impact on carers.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What advice would you give for someone experiencing that sort of grief, whether it's a carer or friend or family member of someone with brain injury?
To be honest, Luca, the first thing I'd say is actually make use of Headway resources. There are people employed by Headway that are far more expert in this area than I am. And I would say don't hesitate to pick up the phone to our nurse-led helpline, because people are talking about this day in, day out to lots of different survivors and their family members, and they really do help people. Similarly, we've got expert publications written on our website as well that talk in great depths about these things. And there's a real understanding that exists within Headway, within staff members, within the helpline too, a very compassionate as well as expert response.
Colin, how would someone get in touch with the advice line, and what hours is the advice line managed?
Yeah. So the Headway helpline is open Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. But people can also email them out of those hours as well. So we pick up emails as well as the phone during those hours.
Brilliant. And now, if someone felt that they really wanted to actually be involved in the campaign and help and volunteer
Yeah.
in some way for the charity, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, the easiest way to support us would be on social media. So you can obviously find our campaign materials on social by following us and retweet those or repost those, add a comment, talk about your own experiences is really important as well to broaden the descriptions of brain injury survivors. So that's really important. So you can use the hashtag Life Rewritten or hashtag ABI Week 2024. If somebody wants to support us more widely, then do come through to our website, click on the volunteering link and talk to us.
Amazing. Thanks so much for your time today, Colin. That was so interesting. And I wish Headway all the best for the ABI week. It's an incredibly important charity. We'll help in any way we can. And I just want to say thanks once more.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity talking to you, Luca.
Take care, Colin.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.